statewide sports talk show. Broadcast on 102.9 ESPN radio for Western Montana and across the state on SWX television.
I like football!
Now, the 2017 Radio Sports Broadcaster of the Year on the show with back-to-back Montana Broadcaster Association awards for sports coverage and award-winning sports journalism. Here is Ryan Tootell and Colter Nuanez.
Hello, Montana. Juwan Howard is the new head coach at Michigan. And the Eastern Conference Finals tied at 2 games apiece. It is Tootell and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio. Outstanding to be with you on this Wednesday afternoon. Hope you are having a fantastic day. Thanks for spending some of it with us on your radios and across the state of Montana on SWX Montana Television. Great to be with all of you. Thanks for being here. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. You can find us online as well, 1029ESPN.com. Coughing. There, you can listen to the stream. The stream is available all the time. 1029ESPN.com. It's there thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. You can also pick up your phone and call us, 329-1899. The phone number. All guests join us via the Rankage Brothers RV phone line. We're going to get into some NBA stuff. We're going to get into some college basketball stuff. John Beilein heading for the Cavs. Juwan Howard filling his shoes at Michigan. So some dominoes moving around there a little bit. We may get into some baseball stuff, an interesting baseball story. The first of its kind, in fact, for a 19-year-old kid prospect from Florida who's now going to Japan to play rather than pursuing the major leagues directly through the minor league system, and why you might want to go ahead and do that. We'll get into some of that stuff. And also, it is a Wing It Wednesday. That's right. We're going to give away baskets of wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern today. Got some trivia for you. Got some good ones for you today on that. There you go. That's what we got going on in the show today. You bitter that I muted you first thing right out the gate?
No, I'm bitter that you acted like it was my fault when you know that I cough, you control the buttons, so it's your fault, and therefore blaming it on me is just incorrect.
I mean, you did cough.
You're right. If I had a cough button, I would have hit it. You're the only one that's got it.
But how can I sense your cough coming on?
You could look at me.
I'm doing the rundown. I'm in the outline here.
Here I am, 30 seconds into the show, already pissed off.
Tommy, how we doing back there? We already see Colter said he was going to have a great day today because he was cleansing yesterday, and now Wednesday's supposed to be his good day, and now I've already poked the bear.
My mood just did a flip, a 180 right there.
You're happy.
Yesterday, Colter, no, I'm in a rage now. I've been euphoric all day. Colter comes in here and he says, so yesterday he made this bold claim, tomorrow I'm going to be happy because I'm eating
happy.
bouillon.
Ryan just made me mad.
Okay, but Colter, I thought we talked about this. If you're eating these tofu squares, these bouillon chicken tofu squares, green tea squares, you're supposed to wake up happy.
I am happy.
But the point is you're on edge, bro. You just yelled at Ryan like a kid about a cough.
Yes, I did.
Well, I'm just trying to train him to be a better version of himself.
Oh, stop.
It's just the facts of the matter. I feel great. I actually feel as good as I have felt since I worked at ESPN Missoula.
You are glowing today with happiness.
I did
sweat.
I did a sweat cycle class today, thanks to Allie down at the sweatshop. It was unbelievable, super hard, very mesmerizing, and an absolutely excellent workout. Something I am excited to continue.
I did a spin class once. Never again.
Well,
never again.
Well,
some people smoke like
not so
one
fast.
cigarette and they throw up and they're like, whoa, no, I'm never touching tobacco again. That was me on the bike at the gym.
You might be required.
It's a bad comparison.
It might be a Tootell Nuanez requirement.
What, smoke cigarettes or ride bikes? Maybe we should get Ryan Shane smoking.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to pick up the habit here, Yeah, get my voice another octave lower.
How you doing? Are you back to normal yet?
Absolutely not.
What are you going to do to remedy this?
Fell asleep on the couch, 11 p.m., woke up on the couch, 2:30 a.m., been up since.
Really?
reading books.
That's
Watched
good.
the entire Cubs-Phillies game this
I think
morning,
that's actually
which was
the
phenomenal.
first next step.
It's just to stay awake.
Yeah. And then tonight, stay up as late as you can. Stay up till like 10. And then go to sleep and then wake up at a normal time tomorrow. And I think you'll be on your way to being back on track.
The thing that bothers me is that I've been crashing. Like when I'm going
It's because
to
you've been
bed-
drinking 14 cups of coffee a day.
No. First of all, that is.
I am
standard.
making coffee right
Thank you,
now.
Tommy. I actually went back and I complained to Tommy that there was no coffee in hopes that he would just go and do it, and he did it. God
In
bless
record time, by the way. Give me some credit
him.
here,
Yeah,
man.
great.
It was actually
I'll
impressive.
expect you to bring that in here as soon as it's completed. No waiting for breaks. The thing is that I've been falling asleep at like a very respectable and time I'd like to go to sleep, like in the 10 to 11 range, right? And I'm out. I've had dreams each of the I'm not a dreamer, man. You know this about me. I'm blackness. I got no recall. Nothing's going on in my head as usual. Go ahead, make your jokes. It's fine. But I'm not seeing any visions in my sleep. Last 2 nights, I've been down so deep, I'm seeing dreams. Okay? For 3 hours. And then I'm, boom, rock and roll. And you know who else is up? Everybody else in my household. Making breakfast for the kids. Complete darkness outside.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I don't know, man. Your the children's situation is going to be interesting. I think your daughter is going to be able to adjust back. It's going to take Kai, man,
Maybe never.
a long time because the disrupted sleep schedule, when it's like 1/8 of your life that you've lived so far, and you got off of it for 1/8 of your life, and it's the most recent 1/8 of your life. I don't know, man. It's going to take a long time for him to get back rolling.
Totally agree with you.
He was
on
ready.
that.
He was
Listen,
UFC fighting me the other night, ready to roll.
He did get you right on the bridge of the nose with a headbutt.
He get right hook to the temple.
He's a fighter, man.
Cackling, laughing. I know it's why it's why I'm stealing him someday.
Yeah. By the way, Tina's no better. I went home for lunch today. Quick drop by, 1:00. Everybody out, Tina included. Walk downstairs. She kind of does the vague, confused what's going on, and looks at me. It's like, what time is it? I said it's 1. It's actually almost 1:30. She goes, you haven't been to work yet? You gotta go. It's like, you kidding me? I've been at work all day. What have you been doing? Sitting here getting the beauty sleep. So she's not coming back too soon either. Anyway, if you're wanting to come over to my house, 4 a.m., not 4 p.m. Okay, that's when you need to be there. Coulter, lots to get through today, so let's jump into it. First of all, you and I couldn't have been wronger on the game last night. We both had Milwaukee. I did say that incorrectly intentionally, just for fun. The Toronto Raptors, smoked the Milwaukee Bucks, and they got a lead on Milwaukee, and it was kind of hovering around double digits, and Milwaukee would get it down to 7 or 6, and then it'd go back to 11, 12, and for this kind of whole thing. And then late third, early fourth quarter comes around, and Toronto straight steamrolled the Milwaukee Bucks, which I must say, aside from a win, I absolutely did not see a blowout coming the way that it came last night. And I'll tell you what impressed the heck out of me was the Toronto Raptor defense. We know what a great defensive player Kawhi Leonard is, but they were stifling to the Milwaukee Bucks. Could get nothing going to the basket. There was a bunch of shooting. Chris Middleton really single-handedly kept Milwaukee in that game because he's a great player. He's a great shooter. And he was making it happen for them, but there was nobody else. And I thought the way that game started, Giannis was ferocious. And he was on one the way he was on it in game 2 when Milwaukee blew out Toronto. And Toronto responded. There was a 1-point game at the quarter. You go, okay, what do we got here? This is interesting. And then Toronto runs away with it. I must say I was very surprised by that. It does not change my expectation that Milwaukee both will bounce back in Game 5 and in the series and win this thing. But what I had anticipated being a 5-game series is obviously mathematically impossible at this point and could very well be a 7th game. I was impressed with the Toronto Raptors last night.
It's amazing how past performances and overwhelming overwhelming narratives sometimes play into our opinions about things. You don't believe in that kind of stuff as much as I do, kind of the concept of having a monkey on your back and having to get it off, especially in pro sports where so much stuff is overturning now. But I think it's a real thing, just the psychological barrier that the Toronto Raptors have had and do have. And I think that the number one thing that is changing that is Kawhi Leonard. And I think when you have a player like Kawhi Leonard, I think it raises the level of confidence of everybody else on your team. So even if they are part of these Raptors teams that have won 60 games and not been able to get out of the conference semifinals the last couple of years, or if they're new players, to me in the NBA, having multiple superstar guys that don't know the hierarchy amongst themselves is a detrimental factor. And I think that's why we saw with the Blazers, they have a very defined hierarchy on their team. And that's why I think they are so fluid and so appealing to watch, and why they're so dangerous, because you can't take away Damian Lillard. They're all NBA guard. And then you still have to figure out a way to deal with CJ McCollum. They just don't quite have that third guy. But I think that the Raptors are very much the same in the fact that when your best player is DeMar DeRozan, I do not think that engenders confidence in the rest of the team. It's not that they're not confident in DeMar DeRozan, because DeMar DeRozan's a fine player. He's an all-star. He's good. But it's not like, man, when it's all going to hell, we can get out the way and DeMar DeRozan's going to carry us. But with Kawhi, you can't.
Well, and the other thing, too, is if DeMar DeRozan's your best player, he's a very good and even great player, in terms of, talk about an all-star. If you're an all-star, you are a great player, at least in that season. But guess what? When you're playing in the playoffs, who's on the other teams? Is DeMar DeRozan better than Kawhi Leonard if you were playing the Spurs at that time? Is he better than LeBron James? Is he better than Giannis? Is he better than Steph? Is he better than KD? Is he better than Harden? Is he better than Westbrook? Better than Paul? No, he's not better than any of these guys.
Right.
And those are the guys that you are playing against now. So as good as he might be, and the depth of it, you talk about shortening the bench in the postseason. You're right about that. The point is not that you can't rely on him because of him. The point is that good as he is, he's not as good as the best players on the teams you're playing. And that is where the gap comes, and why one of the reasons the Raptors could never get over that hump.
100%. And I also think that there's a distinct narrative here of the fact that Kawhi Leonard's non-gregarious, non-engaging, non-marketable sort of persona, I think gave him this exceptional level of intrigue before last season happened. I think they were eager to rank Kawhi Leonard among the best players in the league. He was praised for his non-outgoing ways, and it was such a perfect fit with the Spurs.
Right.
And then when it all went awry, it was, first of all, the only dysfunctional thing that has happened internally with the San Antonio Spurs in 25 years.
Yep.
Since Greg Popovich has been the GM, they have had nothing. And the Kawhi Leonard saga was staggering. But we talked about it multiple times last year when this was going on. Because Kawhi Leonard is this silent guy, that saga actually didn't get as much play as I thought it deserved to get. Think about how much play LeBron James growing got this year. And LeBron's seeing outside doctors, and he's seeing outside physical therapists, and there's all this conflict internally with the Lakers. It was the lead story almost every single day, whereas Kawhi, it was talked about, and then it was kind of just like, well, they'll figure it out, or maybe they won't, but whatever. But then when it all came full circle and he got shipped to Canada, then it somehow damaged his reputation. And it seems to me that Kawhi Leonard is on a mission to remind everybody just how good he is. And the fact that they didn't fold last night and they did win that game, and now they turned this thing into a 3-game series. It's impressive. And I think Kawhi Leonard deserves a ton of credit for it. And I think that regardless of what his stats were last night, even more so, you got Serge Ibaka dunking on people's faces again. Yeah. You got Fred VanVleet playing lights out as a backup point guard. Kyle Lowry is the most up and down polarizing guy. Sometimes I watch Kyle Lowry, I'm like, this guy's trash. How's this guy ever been an all-star? And then sometimes I watch him and he drops 35 in a playoff game, and you're like, well, maybe he's one of the 15 best players in the league. I don't know. My opinion of him is so diverse, but I think every single one of those factors, from Nick Nurse, his ability to be a first-year head coach and navigate this to this point, to Kyle Lowry's resurgence, to everything, I think it all stems on and is centered upon Kawhi Leonard. It's
Tootell and Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, and worldwide on YouTube television. Check it out, Tootell and Nuanez YouTube channel. Coulter, you know who Kawhi Leonard is to me, pulling from the NFL? Marvin Harrison.
That's a good one. Hopefully Kawhi Leonard's post-career doesn't play out like Marvin Harrison's has.
But this is actually the point that I want to make. Marvin Harrison didn't say a word, didn't do any media, didn't want to do any media, shut up, played, was a great player. Peyton Manning aside, Marvin Harrison he's a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And then to have him there and obviously have this great rapport with Peyton Manning, who's the most outgoing, gregarious, funny, guy that you can have and all of that, the face of the league for years and years. And Marvin Harrison not saying anything became a very beloved figure and a guy who everybody was, just assumed the best on. And you should assume the best, I think, on people in general. And I'm not saying that Marvin Harrison's a bad guy necessarily, but there's a lot of things that Marvin Harrison became associated with in some events and some things that transpired at the end and after his playing career where everybody was like, what? I mean, I thought this guy was just like the quiet, like he's headed to the library after the game, someplace where he could be to himself. And what is going on here? My point is, I'm not saying Kawhi Leonard's any of that stuff, but my point is we got no clue. We got no idea what makes this guy tick. And by the way, anybody that's as good as Kawhi Leonard, it's so much more than the physical tools he's got. He's a straight killer when it comes to competitiveness, to drive, to work ethic, to desire. And that stuff has a very quiet and stoic face to it, a cover to it on Kawhi Leonard. But what's really going on internally in that guy, no one knows. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing. It draws me to him, but it also is a reminder to me, don't sit here and imagine that you have any idea what he's thinking about, what he's got going on, because you do not. And so, when you talk about the drama that played out in San Antonio, well, how could Kawhi Leonard be doing this? He's just a quiet, affable guy. Well, no, he's quiet, and we don't know what he is in terms of what he wants and what he's up to and what he's willing to do to get that. So that's all I'm saying about that. Watching him play this year, he's on a mission, just like you said, on a straight mission to remind everybody, hey, you thought, that I had it down. He said, I had it down a year last year. Yeah, 9 games. Pretty down
an irrelevant year last year.
Didn't play. So watching him this year has been spectacular to see. And for him to do it in Toronto is a breakthrough significantly because, like you said, it's a team that really hasn't done it before. By the way, Coulter, I know you wanted to talk about this. They're doing everything. They're pulling out all the stops in Toronto to get Kawhi Leonard to stay. Now, if anything, you got to believe that he's a guy who's going to do what he wants to do. But I do get a kick out of this. We're not talking about just hashtags. We're not talking about, a conversation that's being had. We're talking about actual posters and pictures being put up in stores with the icon, Kawhi dines free here. Tell them about it.
Kawhi and dine. It's classic. Something like 5 dozen, as many as 60 establishments have put up these stickers to try to recruit. They say it says Kawhi and dine. Kawhi eats free here for life, and it has his face on it. And this is like an initiative. There's a social media account, Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. People encouraging. If you want to sign up, you can be a part of it. And there's a couple law offices and insurance agencies that have said, well, we'll get you all set up. You want your
pro bono
401k, you want your living will, you want your insurance. We got you. And then you factor in the exchange rate, and you factor in the tax situation, and you factor in if you want to get to America, you can, and you're traveling for work. It just seems like the ideal job to me. This sounds like me and you would be just all in on signing with Toronto.
You know, here's the funny thing is that what's the line from? It's not. I'm not gonna get there. It's not Rounders, but it's one of those types of movies with Vince Vaughn and they're gambling and so forth and so on in Vegas. I'll come up with it, but he says, "See, you got to act like you don't need the stuff. That way, they give you the stuff for free." He's trying to work Vegas, like getting free dinners and stuff.
This is Tommy Evans.
It's Tommy Evans. But here's
I got like 3 players clubs in my wallet because Tommy's like, you got to sign up for those.
You know the thing I love the thing I love more than anything else on earth, gift cards.
Do you? I didn't know that about you.
Love.
So why didn't you get the pinwheel of gift cards at the White Elephant?
Well, that's
Day?
a great question.
I still have
Hold
not.
up. Tommy Evans, God bless you.
I have not to this day.
Cream and sugar with this coffee. Look at you. You're a prince, an absolute prince.
We are
Cream's good, no sugar.
We are 3 days short of 5 months out from Christmas. I have still not figured out which gift card
is loaded.
Is the loaded one from the pinwheel of death that I got at the White Elephant. I got a stack of empty gift cards on top of my dresser. It's just so annoying.
Tommy's brought me coffee, which I just had to pause and say thank you to him for because I am dragging here. Coulter, gift cards. Why do I love gift cards? Because it's like if I have actual money,
right?
You're like,
I can spend this on something else.
I should probably pay the electric bill.
Right,
I should probably pay the mortgage. If you have a gift card, you're like, anything I want up to this amount, I can have it. It's a poor man's methodology to wealth, to feeling like you're rich in, the Best Buy or whatever it is for 6 seconds while you can buy a $25 of things. So Kawhi Leonard, what this sounds like to you and me, wait a minute. I could go around the city of Toronto and just order up and let's go. Greatest thing on earth, except for if you're Kawhi Leonard, where, first of all, you do not need anything for free, particularly food items, which are pretty inexpensive on the scale of paying for things in the world. And also, particularly coming out of San Antonio with Greg Popovich and his Michelin Guide dining tour to the world, where they've been going to straight symphonies and 5-star restaurants,
drinking wine
to create,
every night.
Thousands of dollars bottles of wine to create, good team chemistry. Everybody wants to know what's the secret. That's the secret in San Antonio, is just $1 million years worth of food and drink. Being able to get a free bagel, cute as it is, fun as it might be to you and I don't know that it moves the needle for Kawhi Leonard.
I think it's more the concept. I mean, if Kawhi Leonard re-signs with Toronto, he's going to sign a $190 million contract.
Right. That's the one thing Toronto can do. They can give $50 million more to Kawhi than any other team.
And so, obviously,
5-year, $190.
Obviously, there's very few dinners in the world you can go to where you can't afford it if you have a $190 million contract. If you're making $45 million a year, I think you could probably afford pretty much any restaurant. I think it's more just the gesture. And, I think it's not just for 5 years, it's for life.
It's for life.
I mean, imagine if it's just like being, it's like being an old town 150 years ago, being the mayor and being able to go wherever you want. You know, like you can just be the mayor of Toronto.
Maybe you'd get into a bad business deal, and you lose all your money. You'll never be hungry.
And also, it just would be fun with your friends and your family. Hey, I'm worth $200 million. I'll take you to dinner. It doesn't sound as fun or as genuine as, you want to go eat at one of the 75 restaurants I can go eat at it for free? We can order whatever we want. Sounds great.
My pictures in the window.
Yeah.
You own this place? No. They just like
it's not going to work, which is the bummer of it all.
Well, of course it's not going to work. You know what it is? It's a great marketing tool for the restaurateurs. I mean,
100%.
When they sit there and go, hey, we're banding together. Let's get the Kawhi thing going. Everybody's like, I'm eating at the Kawhi restaurants now.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I would not be surprised if 150, 200. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if every restaurant in Toronto signs up for this at some point because, like you're saying, he can only eat so many meals a day. It's only, maximum costing you. Say he came to your restaurant once a week. Still,
First of all, he's never going to.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Kawhi Leonard's not going out to dinner 30 nights in a row. Like, he's going to go to these places like once each ever.
Yes, maybe.
But like you're saying, you're going to get hundreds, if not thousands, of patrons that are like, maybe Kawhi's eating here tonight.
The point is, too, is the cheapest, greatest marketing you could ever have is to give something free to a famous person and let them do their thing with it. Like if Kawhi,
everybody out there listening, Ryan's famous. Take notes.
I am, and I'm looking for a truck. If Kawhi's eating at your restaurant, you are not thinking twice. You are bringing out all of the most expensive things you have in your entire area to give to him, because then you can say Kawhi Leonard ate here, and now forget about it. Just bringing him in. That's it. And all he had to do was eat there. That's the weird power of celebrity, which I have. It is Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtzpolaris studios, and it is time to do a little trivia. Ooh. It's a Wing It Wednesday, 329-1899, the phone number. You want a basket of wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern? Of course you do, because they are great. They are the best wings in the city, according to the voting public. Got some trivia questions for you. Answer a couple of these, you're going to be elbow deep in wing sauce, which is really the point of all of this. 329-1899. Wing It Wednesday, right after this.
Hey, Tootell Nuanez here. Can't tell you how many times we've heard the face for radio joke since we came on SWX television, but it's been a fun endeavor so far.
And now our esteemed producer, Tommy, is pushing the envelope even further. We got our own YouTube channel.
That's right. If you want to watch us every day from your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, you can check out Tootell Nuanez on YouTube.
Tootell Nuanez, live every weekday from 4 to 6 in the afternoons on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula, SWX Montana statewide, and now around the planet Earth on YouTube.
The Montana Club invites you to stop in for Club Cocktail Hour. Every day from 3 to 6, sip on $5 martinis. Get $1 off all wine and beer, including cool Montana micros. Enjoy $3 off all mouth-watering appetizers, or swing by Friday for Montini Night and perfectly mixed $5 top shelf martinis from 3 to close. It's time to relax at the Montana Club. Real Montana, real food on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Hey folks, Ryan Tootell here, and I'm with Josh from the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, if our listeners have been injured in an accident, how can you help?
We're here to help you after a car accident by negotiating with insurance companies, recovering lost wages if you have any, and even getting you into a rental car if you need one. Call us today for a free consultation, and we'll get started helping you right away.
If you need help, get a hold of the Advocates. Call Josh at 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve an advocate. Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at canyonrivergolfclub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
When you need a bank to help ramp up your savings strategy, look to your local bank, Opportunity Bank of Montana. Build confidence in your financial future when you create a rainy day cushion or take care of the nest egg you already have. Opportunity Bank offers options from basic savings to money market accounts and certificates with competitive rates. There's nothing like the feeling of progress, so let's get started today. Come see us at Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com. Member FDIC.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tootell, Colter Nuanez, ESPN Sports Center. Hey, Keenan Curran, 3-year starter who got 20 touchdowns for the Grizzlies, will play for the Seattle XFL team, according to XFL Endzone's Twitter account. The 6'2", 198-pounder from Federal Way got 125 passes for 2,008 yards and 20 touchdowns during his 3 years at Montana after transferring from the Air Force Academy Prep School.
Former standout Big Sky wide receivers Keelan Doss of UC Davis and Emmanuel Butler of Northern Arizona signed free agent contracts after rookie minicamps earlier this month. Doss, the 2017 Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, signed with the Oakland Raiders. Butler, a two-time All-American, signed with the New Orleans Saints. For more on former Big Sky Conference players in the NFL, stick it right here. 445, got a full update for you.
Former Big Timber basketball standout Brett Finn has decided to finish his college basketball career at Montana State. Finn, who spent 2 years at Dawson Community College last season and the last season at Texas A&M International University, announced Tuesday on Twitter he's transferring to MSU. 6-foot guard averaged 14.1 points per game at the Division II school last year.
And finally, a total of 24 athletes with Treasure State ties will compete at the NCAA Western Preliminary Championships in Sacramento, California, beginning tomorrow. That includes 6 Montana Grizzlies, 5 Montana State Bobcats. We got more second hour, Tootell and Nuanez.
Tiny supernatural delight. Everybody's dancing in the moonlight. Dancing in the moonlight. Everybody's feeling warm and bright. It's such a fine and natural sight. Everybody.
It just never fails. It never fails.
I mean,
Later.
I just have variety is the spice of life, Gus.
It's Tootell and Nuanez, 1029 ESPN Radio. It's time for a Wing It Wednesday. If you want to do that, 329-1899, the phone number. Got some questions for you, trivia questions. Get yourself a basket of wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, also Highway 83 in Sealy. You can check them out online at kurtzpolaris.com. You can find us on the Twitter machine at Gus Tootell. That's me, at 1029 ESPN, and at Skyline Sports MT. Do you think at retweet is a handle that's already taken?
I bet.
Because that might be the way I should go.
Hey, Colter.
Hey, Tommy.
Since you're thinking so clearly, you're cleansed, maybe you can decipher why no one's calling in for wings. I've confirmed that it's not a technical engineering issue.
329-1899. Ryan's got 2 out of his 3 questions prepared in typical Ryan Tootell fashion. I don't know why he can't just think of 3 before the show.
The hardest thing I do, and this is an indictment on me, I get it, but the hardest thing I do every week at this job is writing 3 trivia questions.
It's just amazing that you know so much about sports and you can't think of 3. I mean,
it's impossible.
It's such a simple formula. What's going on in sports? Cool. Can I tie a trivia question to it? Like, my trivia questions are about the Stanley Cup Finals.
Final.
Don't Tyler line
give
one.
it away because I do have a Stanley Cup question.
Great. Hopefully you didn't copy mine.
One of my 2. All right, Tyler, you've done a good thing. You've called in for wings. How are you, Tyler?
Doing good.
Glad to hear it. Have you had Desperado wings before?
You know it.
Is it your favorite wing that you've had around here?
I'll say yes.
Good man.
Excellent work. Tyler, here's the deal, my friend. We got 3 questions for you. If you get 2 of them right, you got yourself a basket of wings to the Desperado Sports Tavern. If you get all 3, you got yourself a shirt to go along with it. And if you need any help on any of these, Colter is your lifeline. Does that sound all right to you?
Sounds great.
Boy, some chicken wings would really hit the spot. Tummy likey. Tummy want wingy.
All right. Have you been following Michigan basketball, Tyler? The coaching situation.
I'm a Big Ten follower.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. John Beilein left the University of Michigan for what head coaching position?
Cleveland.
He is the Cleveland Cavaliers head basketball coach. Excellent work. Question 1 knocked it out. Question number 2. What 2 teams are playing each other in the Stanley Cup final. There were two. The big win last night, punching the ticket for the Western Conference team to play the Eastern Conference team. Who are the two teams in the Stanley Cup final?
Was it San Jose and the Bruins?
It is the Bruins, and it is the St. Louis Blues, my friend.
Oh,
the Blues dominating the San Jose Sharks last night. The Sharks without Joe Pavelski, without Eric Carlson. Terrible to have those guys out in what turned out to be a clinching game for San Jose. Very disappointing. But it is the Blues in there for the first time in quite a while. Okay, hey, by the way, okay, so here we go. Question number 3, okay? You still have a lifeline, but you got to get this one for Wings. Just announced within the hour, who is the new head coach of the University of Michigan, taking up the seat that John Beilein vacated?
I'll go to Coulter on that one.
He is by third in the hierarchy of the Fab Five, right? I mean,
yeah. Well,
Chris Webber was the number one Fab Five guy, and Jalen Rose number 2. Juwan Howard is the number 3 from the Fab Five and is now the new head coach for the Michigan Wolverines.
Do you accept Juwan Howard as the number 3 guy of the Fab Five and also the new Michigan head coach?
Coulter.
Indeed.
I accept Juwan Howard for sure.
Very good. Tyler, you got it. 2 out of 3. You got yourself a basket of wings to the Desperado. Congratulations, my friend. Excellently done by you. Give yourself your information there to Tommy. We'll get you all set up.
Then go Bucks, too. I know you guys were doubters at the beginning of the playoffs.
Hey.
But, there we go, huh?
Well, you maybe don't want us on board because we finally got on board yesterday and they got stuck. But, yes, go Bucks indeed.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
You got it.
Keep it up.
You think Jalen more than Juwan? Like, Jalen's done a lot more in his post-career and done, more, being part of Jalen and Jacoby and being I think he's a phenomenal analyst, studio analyst. I love his perspective, his stories, his honesty, all that stuff. But I don't know. I thought Juwan Howard's right there as the number 2 guy behind Chris Webber. We talking about Michigan? We talking about?
I guess we got to determine how we're gauging.
I mean,
this.
It's impossible to know.
I think that Jalen Rose had a better high school, college, and pro career than Juwan Howard. The pro is closer, but I just think that if you were to ask, I know there's all sorts of weird stuff with those guys now. Like Jalen and Juwan Howard still get along, but like Chris Webber and Jalen don't get along, and it's super weird. Like they don't talk.
Chris Webber and a lot of them don't.
What's that?
I think Chris Webber and the group don't really.
Right. And like there was a whole bunch of shystiness going on and a whole bunch of behind the back action when they were making that documentary because Jalen Rose was involved in producing it and Chris Webber like wanted to be but then couldn't. And so regardless, I think if you were to ask when they were 25 years old, if you were to ask Chris Webber and Juwan Howard and Jalen Rose who was the leader of that team, they would all 3 tell you Jalen Rose. I think that Jalen Rose's NBA career was tainted is the wrong word, but was underappreciated because of how many teams he played for. But people forget, I mean, Jalen Rose averaged 24 points per game for 2 years in a row. Jalen Rose was a career 16.5 point per game scorer. I mean, Chris Webber is one of the 100 greatest players of all time. So there's no disputing that Chris Webber
was the best player of the Fab
for
Five
sure the
in
whole
college
time.
too.
In college too, 100%. I mean, Chris Webber was the number 1 overall pick. And Chris Webber is in a distinct group of players that is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer that is also the guy that everybody thinks underachieved. There's only maybe 5 guys in the history of the league that are that, right? I mean, Chris Webber was a 25-10 guy for 15 years. He's the number 1 overall pick.
I don't even know that he underachieved. It's just he didn't win. He didn't win the championship.
Yeah, but I mean, of the Generation X of the 90s, early 2000s guys. The two guys who were supposed to set the league on fire and be faces of the league and, perennial MVP contenders and championship contenders who then were simply just all-stars. And that's not a slight at all. Chris Webber was a 10-time all-star, but he was never a first-team All-NBA player, and he was never an MVP, and he never got to the finals. It's Chris Webber and Vince Carter, man. And I think both those guys, they'll always be tagged with what could have been. Grant Hill's in that category too, but his is so much more because of injury. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a distinct softness that is tagged to Vince Carter and Chris Webber. Fair or not, I think it's slightly unfair.
Vince Carter's 68 years old. He's still playing in the league.
Still starting in the league.
Yeah. So, I don't know that we
No, Vince, okay, so and that's the thing, too, though, is Vince Carter has had such a long career, and the second half of his career has been so outstanding in a completely and utterly different way than the first half of his career that there's a redefinition that needs to happen for Vince Carter.
Have you seen a guy who has been forced to and then able to evolve his game to a larger extent to do more things that he never had to do before at a high enough level to be a starter than Vince Carter? Guys do change their game and have changed their game, and in some cases drastically. But you had what was simply the greatest athlete just about anybody could have ever imagined doing the thing in the arena where that pays you the highest dividends.
That's a really good topic.
And
that's a really
now
good topic.
You have one of the most prolific three-point shooters in the history of the game.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent topic because there has been a couple other guys that popped in my mind right away. Mm-hmm. Antonio McDyess became a great kind of pick and pop 17-foot jump shooter after he tore his knee. Antonio McDyess, Antonio McDyess is one of those stupidest, most athletic, stupid athletic guys I've ever seen in my life. I remember I had a basketball card. It was a series of these UD3, upper deck threes. You only got 3 cards per pack. And one of the series was called the Dunk Masters, and they had cards of the 20 best dunkers in the league. And on the back of that card, it said Antonio McDyess's 2-foot jump. So if he takes 2 steps and then he gets 2 steps to then jump, so a little bit more than a vertical, was 59 inches. He's 6'10". That's not real. But then he blows out his knee horrifically, and he can't jump at all anymore. But he still had a very productive career. People forget, on those Pistons teams, everybody remembers Chauncey Billups, Tayshaun Prince, and Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace. They forget that Antonio McDyess was hitting mid-range jump shots all day on those teams. The other guy that popped into my mind, and this might be kind of out of left field, even though he's one of the all-time greatest players ever, is Karl Malone. For the first 10 years of Karl Malone's career, Karl Malone was running the lane and dunking. And his 2 MVP seasons, Karl Malone was doing a little shimmy shake. He was shooting that fadeaway from the baseline.
One of the weirdest great shooters and shooting touches that you can imagine, because it looks impossible that he could even feel the basketball in his hand, and say nothing of putting.
And that he could even hold, and they could even hold the basketball and not pop it.
Yeah, totally, completely.
Right, Regime and I did a fun segment last week, and maybe we could actually rehash this because this would be fun to do with you too. We did our all '90s teams from the NBA, but you weren't allowed to pick superstars. So Karl Malone and
Barkley,
Gary
and
Payton, and Barkley and Ewing and David Robinson and Elijah Wan, and these guys are out. It was kind of just like the next notch down.
Sam Perkins.
Yeah, I had my backcourt was Tim Hardaway and Mitch Richmond with Del Curry as the third guard. I had Larry Johnson playing the 3, Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, and Antonio Davis as my up front rotation.
Just every guy who this today would just be a UFC fighter.
Isn't that so true? God, I was watching, there's a just phenomenal documentary about Muhammad Ali produced by Maverick Carter and LeBron James on HBO. It's called What's My Name? It's 2 hour-and-a-half long deals. And there's more footage than I'm a Muhammad Ali nut. I'm a junkie. And there's more unseen footage in there than I've ever seen. I've learned so much from this documentary. But they show in total in that documentary through the lens of Ali, the George Foreman Joe Frazier fight, when George Foreman just ruins Joe Frazier's life. I mean, he knocks him down 6 times. I could not believe the ref didn't stop the fight. Joe Frazier is enormous.
Yes.
And he's flying across the ring because George Foreman is hitting him so hard. And all I kept thinking, though, during that was you see George Foreman sitting there. I'm like, man, this is why boxing is dead, because that guy is playing DN for the Cleveland Browns right now. His name is Myles Garrett. Instead, George Foreman was knocking people out.
He's a fighter, yeah. It's very true. All right, Tootell, Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Another Wing It Wednesday coming up next hour. Stick around for that. Coulter wants to do an analysis of Big Sky players in the NFL and what it says about the league. He will tell us just that next. Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com.
Florence Coffee strives to bring you the best quality in each and every drink, serving a variety of products with no artificial flavoring and no preservatives, like our delicious ice mochas to our all-natural creme brulee lattes. Stop by any of our Flowco locations throughout western Montana to see our lineup of all-natural flavors and go to FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky, Florence Coffee Company.
Hey there, Coulter Nuanez from Tootell, Nuanez 102.9 ESPN Missoula, here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom got me a great deal on an automatic car starter this winter. Now it's summer. What sort of stuff you guys got going on down there, Tom?
Well, Coulter, coming into the summertime, we're picking up on the window tinting front. So if you need your windows tinted, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled up. Boats and ATVs are starting to come in full swing, and we're also starting to see the hot rods come out to play. Anything audio related, let us know. We'll get you taken care of.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
Springtime is the time to buy a new Polaris off-road vehicle. During the spring sales event, rebates go as high as $1,500 and financing is as low as 3.99%. Live your life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger, or take on any task or trail in a versatile Polaris General. Whatever you're looking for, now is the time to take your pick from the off-road's best-selling lineup. See Polaris.com or your Polaris dealer for rebates up to $1,500 and financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months during the Polaris Spring Sales event at Kurtz Polaris. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. Recreate the right way with Kurtz Polaris, online at kurtzpolaris.com. Offer valid in U.S. through 5/31/19 on new 2015 through 2019 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride. Hey folks, Ryan Tootell here, and I'm with Josh of the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, what are people left dealing with after an accident?
Well, quite a few things, actually. We see people that are in pain, they still need to get to work, they need to raise their kids, and now they have to take time to go see doctors and other healthcare providers. They're frustrated with working with the insurance companies and getting the runaround. We'll take on the burden of dealing with the insurance companies so you can get the best settlement possible and get back to your life.
Find your advocate online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate.
Tootell and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
Sing the best rock song in the history of rock music. Enjoy it for a moment. And with
who is it?
A little bit of Project 86. We roll into segment number 3. It is Tootell and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Tommy Evans is the greatest producer in the world because he makes us YouTube channels. He gets us on TV, and when we send him request lists for the bumper music, he abides.
Sin. I mean, you cannot do better than what you got right here, right now. It's Tootell, it's Nuanez, it's Tommy, it's Project 86.
This is definitely the best Project 86 song I've heard so far.
Yeah. I'll help you with, and wait.
I've listened to a lot of Project 86. You know my feelings. I think they're pretty good. I do. I enjoy them. They're not laughable like a lot of your other likes, like Imagine Dragons.
Wait till you read the lyrics, too. Then it takes it to a whole new level. It is Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. It's pleasant to be with you this afternoon. We hope you are well. We appreciate you being with us. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at kurtzpolaris.com. We are online as well, 1029ESPN.com, Facebook/ESPN Missoula, and SkylineSportsMT.com. Listen, people, you want to know what in the world's going on in the Big Sky Conference, specifically in the state of Montana? SkylineSportsMT.com. Go there, subscribe, and know all the things. Okay? Speaking of, this will be actually sort of a picture into a little bit of that knowledge from the proprietor of Skyline, Colter Nuanez. Talk to us here about, I mean, we've talked a little bit about what is a lot less Big Sky guys in the NFL and opportunities in the NFL, it seems, recently than there have been historically. And you said, that's actually not really that true. What is true is that there's not many Montana and Montana State guys the way there have been. It's the Big Sky as a whole is probably doing as well as it's ever done if you're including the rest of the conference. But it's just the Cats and the Grizz who have had a downturn in NFL prospects of late. So, as you were.
The second half of last decade, you could count on 4 or 5 Big Sky guys getting drafted because 2 or 3 Montana Grizzlies were getting drafted, 1 Montana State Bobcat was getting drafted, and whoever else in the league,
and a guy,
and usually you could always count on at least 2 or 3 Grizz. You could always count on as many as 3 combined between Montana State and Eastern Washington, and then anybody else that rose up. And I mean, even during the Ron McBride days, Weber State had a lot of good guys too. I mean, Tim Toon was Mr. Irrelevant in 2010. They've had several guys drafted as well. I think that there's 2 things that have happened here. I think, first of all, the University of Montana being down has been impactful. I mean, we've seen the list of guys in the NFL when you talk about the last group of guys that were recruited by Bobby Hauck, the Brock Coyles and Jordy Tripps of the world, as now we've reached the point where there hasn't been any guys that were recruited by Bobby Hauck in the Montana program, and there hasn't been any guys that played for Bobby Hauck or that understood that culture. And it's not just Coach Hauck. I would say that one of the number one factors in Montana's pipeline of NFL players during the 2000s was Mike Gerber. Mike Gerber, in my opinion, is one of the greatest strength coaches in the history of the Big Sky Conference, perhaps one of the greatest strength coaches in the history of college football. I'm serious. I think Mike Gerber is unbelievable. I think that guys like Colt Anderson would tell you that Mike Gerber had as much of an influence. I bet you Colt would tell you Bobby Hauck, Tim Hauck, Mike Gerber. Those are the 3 guys that helped me get to where I was and be a 9-year NFL vet. But the reason that the weight room is so impactful, the weight coach can see it every day, but also so much of getting to the NFL is the lifestyle. It's the way you treat your body. It's the way that you build and sculpt your body. And that's something that the head coach has almost no influence on. He, or any of the coaches for that matter, besides the strength coach, but also it's a passed down thing. And that's why I think we've seen the pipeline run short a little bit. And this is no criticism of the current strength program at the University of Montana as much as the culture that is in the weight room. Like when you're an underclassman that's watching Colt Anderson and Shan Schillinger lift, you're like, well, that's what you got to do. And then when those guys get drafted, you're like, well, man, I saw how hard they worked. I got to work that hard. And Montana State had some of those tone setter type guys as well, with guys like Dane Fletcher and Mike Person. And there just hasn't been that same passed down mindset. And so I think that is one reason why there's not as many kind of surefire guys going to the league out of the Big Sky. I think the other impactful thing here, and it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, when Bobby Houck left, Bo Baldwin became sort of the godfather of the Big Sky Conference at Eastern Washington. And Eastern Washington became the team that was putting 2 to 3 guys in the league every year. And we saw it a couple years back when Cooper Kump and Samson Ebukam both get picked in the third round, and they had, I think, 5 guys from that team make NFL rosters. And Aaron Neary, who's an offensive lineman, he was also on that Rams team that played in the Super Bowl. 3 Eastern Washington guys on 1 Super Bowl team. Now they signed Simba Webster, so they have another Eastern Washington guy. So I think there's some stuff there too. But I also just think that the league has just been a little bit down in talent, and I also think that some of the most dominant players in the league have just not been NFL guys. Like a guy like Joe Prothero, he's a phenomenal college player. He's an excellent college player. But he's just a tweener when it comes to the NFL. Rushing for 6,000-plus yards as a fullback in a triple option offense, he just doesn't give you a lot of film.
Yeah.
And it gives you 850 carries, you know? Like, so Joe Prothero was just so busted up, and, like, he had a pretty good pro day, but not good enough. You know, he needed to run like a 4.4, and he ran a 4.7. And, you know, 4.7 is plenty fast when you're 235 pounds like him and you're run low to the ground and you can bruise people and you play in that offense, but it doesn't necessarily cater. So I think that the program in the league that has replaced now Eastern Washington is Weber State in terms of NFL guys. But I also think there's been a shift in the NFL where like a guy like Isua Opeta from Weber State, he couldn't have done more to get drafted. I mean, he's 6'4", 305 pounds. He's lean, mean, strong. He had one of the great combines that we've seen. I mean, he ran a 5 flat in the 40, and he had 39 reps. There's the third most reps in the history of the NFL Combine. And he didn't get drafted. And I think that's because teams, what I saw when I look at the draft board is the only way you're going to get drafted now is if teams know that someone else is going to draft you. Because the free agent, the fact that NFL rosters expanded 4 years ago to be 94 players during the offseason and they cut that down to 53, now you can fill quite literally more than half or about half of your roster without having to draft guys. And if you don't draft them, then they don't get any sort of guaranteed contracts. The contract situation is different. You could put them on a week-to-week or a month-to-month or pay them the league minimum, all that kind of stuff. But also you can just go out and get the guy you're going to want anyways. And if someone else doesn't want him, then you don't have to risk a draft pick.
One other thing, Coulter, on this topic. It's easy to look maybe at Montana State and think about Rob Ash, to look at the University of Montana and think about Bob Stitt and go, well, you know, ultimately they didn't recruit guys that were good enough. They didn't find the guys that were good enough to be an NFL players. That though, to me, isn't really the issue. The type of football those guys wanted to play and brought in the type of guys to play that type of football are not the type of guys that are going to matriculate from the FCS to the league. The guys who are going to the NFL, generally speaking, from the state of Montana, the flagship schools, are defensive guys and line guys.
Yep.
It's not skill position guys. It's not quarterbacks. It's not any of this, you know, of that kind of stuff. So a guy like Jeff Choate at Montana State presumably is going to recruit and develop guys who have a much better shot from the start a priori to get into the NFL than in a high-paced, high-scoring spread offense. The same at the University of Montana, going from Bob Stitt into Bobby Houck for the second time.
What do I always talk about with Bobby Houck and his program? The brilliance of the Bobby Houck program is if you buy in and you go to work and you stay healthy, you will be a better version of yourself as a football player and a man than the day you started. 100%. And it's more than just recruiting the talent, because there was no person on planet Earth that looked at Mark Mariani when he was a 5'11", 145-pound Class A state tennis champion from Havre, Montana, was like, that guy's the league. But Mark Mariani developed into an NFL player. Mark Mariani was not a league player until his 4th year in Bobby Houck's program. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Mariani's 6'1", 190. He's not 5'11", 145 anymore, and he's still faster in the wind. And so much of it's mentality. Cole Anderson played for a team that didn't win a game our senior year of high school, Butte High. Got cut from Montana. After his second spring ball, they said, Colt, you're not good enough. We're sending you to Montana Tech. Tim Houck said, nah, we got to have one more fall camp with this guy. Well, goes on and becomes one of, I think, 40 guys in the history of the league to be 3-time first-team all-league unanimous selection because he made himself into that player. Corey Bierman didn't have a position or a scholarship when he came to the University of Montana. He was some rangy 6'3", 210-pound kid who played inside linebacker at Hardin, and he developed enough to be a fifth-round draft pick. So much of it is the culture of development more than anything else.
It is, but here's the other thing. What wide receiver, and Mark Mariani aside, have we seen come through the University of Montana that looked more likely that he could be a pro football player than Sammy Akem right now?
100%.
And Sammy Akem is a great elite recruit by Bob Stitt and Bob Stitt's staff.
But also diamond in the rough because, Bob Stitt's staff recruited 40-some 2- and 3-star guys.
Yeah.
Sammy Akem was not that guy.
Right.
Sammy Akem was the diamond in the rough.
But here's my point. The chance that the wide receiver from the University of Montana, good as he might be, better than what the Big Sky almost ever sees in terms of what appears to be the great talent and size and the combination of things that he brings. And maybe he is a league guy. He might be by the time it's all said and done. I don't know. But what I'm saying is your chances, your prospects are better if you are an elite linebacker or defensive end or offensive lineman coming through Montana and Montana State than if you are having to go against all of the states of Florida and Georgia and Texas, which you still have to do at those positions as well. But when you talk about the speed and the athleticism and all that kind of stuff, the size and strength, you can get guys at Weber State and Montana that can lift and bench and squat as much as anyone in the country.
100%.
Some of them may not be, maybe they're a couple inches shorter. Maybe they're not as agile as some of the 5-star guys that are going to Bama. Certainly that's true. But when you talk about the gap, the athletic, the physical gap that's there, it's just greater when you're talking about the skill position stuff. It's just greater.
It's a great discussion. Let's break.
Okay.
Or I can continue.
Hour number 2. Next.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
Alpine Touch has been providing you with the distinct seasonings you know and love for decades. Now, Alpine Touch has something to help you unleash the freshness of all the delicious flavors you need to spice up any meal. Check out Alpine Touch's new coarse grinds, unleashing the fresh taste of the garlic pepper or all-purpose seasonings to please any nose or taste bud. Coarse grinds can be purchased by the pound at retail locations around the state or at alpinetouch.com. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce 2 of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 Open Range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, ooh, pump it up, pump it up.
Ready to stock up on some party drinks? Town Pump is your store. We've got 18 packs of Twisted Tea for only $18.99, and grab a few bottles of Apothic 750 milliliter wine for a low $9.99. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in Montana. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the Montana High School Association and the Montana Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana. KKVU HD3 Stevensville and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tootell, Colton Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Sports Center. Keenan Curran, a 3-year starter who caught 20 touchdowns for the Grizzlies, will play for the Seattle XFL team, according to the XFL End Zone Twitter account. The 6'2", 198-pounder from Federal Way, Washington, got 125 passes, 2,008 yards, and 20 touchdowns during his 3 years at Montana after transferring from the Air Force Prep Academy School.
Former standout Big Sky wide receivers Keelan Doss of UC Davis and Emmanuel Butler of Northern Arizona signed free agent contracts after rookie minicamps earlier this month. Doss, the 2017 Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, signed with the Oakland Raiders, while Butler, a two-time All-American, signed with the New Orleans Saints. For more on this, stick it right here. We continue our Big Sky in the NFL discussion right now.
Former Big Timber basketball standout Brett Finn has decided to finish his college basketball career at Montana State. Finn, who spent 2 years at Dawson Community College last season, and then 2 years at Dawson Community College, and then last season was at Texas A&M International, announced Tuesday on Twitter he is transferring to MSU. 6-foot guard averaged 14.1 points per game at the Division II school last season.
And finally, a total of 24 athletes with Treasure State ties will compete in the NCAA West Preliminary Championships in Sacramento, California, beginning tomorrow, including 6 Montana Grizzlies, 5 Montana State Bobcats. Missoula native Hannah Fauser, she is one of the top contenders in the women's hammer throw.
When I was just 9 years old, I swear that I dreamt your face on a football field and a kiss that I kept under my vest. Apart from everything.
More thoughts on college football players from the Big Sky going to the NFL, and also some thoughts about the Michigan coaching situation, both former and now current. It is Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the first hour, you can find it on the podcast. The podcast is available on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes and on the station website. It is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. The stream is also available on our station website. That there. With the support of the Opportunity Bank. Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. All right, Coulter, I know you got a couple more thoughts on this topic that we stretched over the top of the hour. So go ahead. Let's hear it.
Well, I think it goes back to first of all, you talked about the type of style of football in Montana that's going to cater to developing the most NFL-type guys. And I think that this has actually been fascinating to watch the trickle-down effect of college football principles into the state of Montana. Even down at Hamilton High School, Class A high school, they are running a really sophisticated version of the spread.
Yeah.
That was never the case. Even I've only been out of high school for 15 years, and when I was in high school, it was ground and pound for days. Like when Helena Capital started running the veer option out of the shotgun, which is basically the origins of the zone read. I remember Mark Sampson telling me this years later. Mark Sampson was the head coach at Helena Capital at the time. He told me years later, he said, I'll never forget a coaching clinic I went to at Ohio State in the late 90s when this young hotshot coach named Urban Meyer, who was at Bowling Green at the time, taught everybody all the different ways you can run the option out of the gun, out of the shotgun. And Helena Capital And they had people's heads spinning. They won 3 straight state championships because they were untouchable. Literally, you never knew where the ball was at. But even just running anything out of the gun was so innovative. I remember Sentinel started running the shotgun mid-2000s, and it was like, whoa, there's a team in Montana running the gun. Now almost everybody runs the spread. I mean, Butte High School, Butte, Montana, of all places, they run the straight air raid. They run 4 wide, check it down the field. And the last time they won the state championship, Dallas Cook set the Montana single-season record for passing yards in a season. Swede Dahlberg and Jim Sweeney would have been rolling over in their graves thinking about Butte High School throwing the ball 50 times a game, but that then directly impacts the way you develop. I think you and Bobby Houck and I talked after signing day. I said, Bobby, I got to ask you this question. I got to know what happened to all the offensive linemen in Montana. Because my whole theory has been you only get semi-developed as an offensive lineman when you're running the spread at a young level. You can develop at a college level for sure, but when you're in high school, if all you're doing is pass pro and stuff, you don't know how to engage, you don't know how to have the physicality, you don't know how to have the meanness, all that kind of stuff. And Bobby also had an interesting point. He said, in eastern Montana, used to have all these farms that took all this manpower, and now, up on the High Line and in eastern Montana, you still have huge farms, but so many less people are required to maintain those farms. And because of that, plus the crop production program, all the CRP land, you got a bunch of people that moved away, and the government's paying them to not develop their land, to not grow. And because of that, you have towns like Miles City and Sydney and Glasgow and Malta that have lost a ton of population, but not just population. You're talking about most of the people that settled in those areas, that homesteaded in those areas, are from either Eastern European or Scandinavian heritage. So you talk about the genes plus the work in the land.
Now they're baling hay.
Right.
Right.
You're just going to get a bunch of big dudes. I mean, a guy like Taryn Hillsland, we haven't seen a lineman like that in Montana in 10 years.
Right.
Taryn was straight 6'8", 320, straight off the farm, never lifted a weight in his life, ready to roll. I mean, he's a plug-and-play guy.
Right.
We haven't seen guys like that in a little while, too. So I think that has hindered the amount of players that come out of the Montana schools. But then I also think that so much of it ebbs and flows with culture. Like when Southern Utah had their little run of putting guys in the league, every one of those guys that when I interviewed them or wrote stories about them, they all praised Ed Lamb for the culture he developed there, former head coach there, but also just the weight room culture. I think that has so much to do with it. Weber State's got that culture right now, and that's why I think they're getting the most guys that are getting shots in the league. But then I also just think that there's a little bit of diluted talent in the Big Sky Conference because I think there isn't as many can't miss, or there isn't as many, it's harder to miss kids now because, even kids from Fairfield, Montana have huddle tape that they can send to coaches. So it's very, and all these FBS schools, you got coaching staffs. I mean, Nick Saban has assistants on top of assistants on top of assistants. They have a cap for the guys that can be considered full-time on your staff, but those guys have analysts and directors of development, and you have strength coaches that are position specific. All these dudes are recruiting.
Right.
And so now you have 50 guys that are recruiting. And so I think that's another element. And then the last thing is I think that, like, you look at this Big Sky list this year, Logan Parker from Southern Utah, Andre Lindsay from Sac State, Marquez Tucker from Southern Utah. Those are just 3, but there was 5 guys from the Big Sky that got NFL shots this year. They were former junior college guys. That's the other thing is the junior college to the junior college to Power 5 route is almost non-existent now because for a lot of reasons. But if you're a Power 5 level talent, they're going to figure out a way to get you in. Right. You don't have to go to a junior college.
Right. All right, Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Interesting stuff. I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we are. Is it too early to say we're starting to turn the corner on football season? Maybe.
Absolutely. 99 days till kickoff.
Can't wait. Cannot wait. Coulter, University of Michigan, has, first of all, occupied a pretty interesting place the last couple of years in the Montana basketball psyche because of the back-to-back NC2A matchups with the Wolverines that the Grizzlies have had. But also, they've been really, I mean, since the Fab Five, Michigan exploded onto the scene. And I honestly don't know what Michigan was in basketball before that. Now, the Fab Five is going all the way back for me. Like, that's one of the teams that I don't need to do history on the Fab Five because I remember the Fab Five, but that's about as far back as I can get where I have a first-person recollection sports-wise. I'm sure that Michigan was good at basketball prior to the Fab Five coming on.
In fact, they won the 1989 national championship.
Great.
Glenn Rice.
It just doesn't matter. Fab Five changed everything. And
the
Michigan,
Fab Five, here's a good one for you. Is the Fab Five the most culturally impactful, the highest impact on pop culture in America of any college sports team?
Not close. Not close.
Who else is in the running? The U?
Michigan Miami football.
Yep.
Miami football 100% is in there.
I think that the difference between Miami football and Michigan basketball, though, was Michigan basketball had such multiracial appeal. Miami football, they were so hard and they were so edgy, but I don't think that it necessarily had the crossover appeal as Michigan basketball. Everybody wanted to wear their shorts like that. Everybody wanted the black Nike socks.
I think the U was significant in its own right, but was also part of something bigger. When you talk about, NWA and Ice Cube and what was going on, in California especially, but with hip hop and a particular strain of hip hop becoming, just the guile of mainstream society, and also the absolute love of the fringes and the youth of society.
It's one of the greatest. It's one of the most landmark moments in music.
Yes.
I think that the led by NWA, and then the infiltration, for lack of a better word, of gangster rap into the American public was one of the most impactful and positive changes, because it revealed so many true stories of the streets that people otherwise would have been in denial of.
And by the way, Michigan basketball, the Fab Five, was certainly a representative of that in a way as well. But I feel like Miami football was they were into that themselves and then footballized it, if I could say it like that.
Right.
Michigan, the Fab Five, were the drivers of the ship. They were the ones making the change that they didn't even know that they were making, I'm sure, to an extent, where they were just like, well, this is what we want to do. But there's 5 African-American players at Michigan now, not just anywhere, at Michigan.
Yeah.
Changing the style to that quote, quote, that urban style or whatever, using
baggy
the
shorts,
coded
long
language and all that
strings.
kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And also, yes, they're all freshmen. They completely flipped the table over on what had always been, you work your way up to be an upperclassman before you even see the floor.
Totally.
So they did it.
Freshmen had only been allowed to play on the quote-unquote varsity for about 15 years at that point.
The sport, the pop culture of it, the skill of it, how good they were.
Yep.
Everything. It's not close that they are the biggest cultural influencers that college athletics has ever seen.
I find the analysis and pairing of certain elements of sports and music, as well as social movements, civil rights movements. Back to this Muhammad Ali documentary. Muhammad Ali, I still think, is perhaps the most impactful athlete of the 20th century because of what he stood for, what he went through, the way he softened America's view of African Americans, of Black Islam, of all these things. But also, it's just so crazy to think of all the people he was in, of his inner circle. I mean, he was 1 degree of separation with Martin Luther King. He was close friends with Malcolm X. Right. He was close friends with Sam Cooke. These guys were getting assassinated around him.
Yes.
Crazy to think about that. But there's been throughout, if you consider the modern history of America, let's say 1960 through the end of the 20th century, there's been so many moments in time that are impossible to replicate. They take so much circumstance, they take so much serendipity, but I just wonder if that kind of stuff is going to happen now anymore, because everything is so diluted, everything's so out there. To have NWA disrupting the public consciousness like they were, to have senators and presidents' wives lobbying on Capitol Hill to get this music out of our youth's hands, and then to have the Rodney King incident and the subsequent riots in LA happen, and to have Dr. Dre drop the Chronic when that happened, all about that. It's too good to be true, and also completely coincidental, and it caused
too good to be true in the sense that the confluence of events
is so unique. But
that the events were good.
No, the events are horrible. Yes. But it completely changed. It was a landmark watershed moment that then it kind of opened floodgates to then what we saw happen the rest of the 90s, which was a wonderful time of acceptance by and large, and a lot of ills had been cured, or at least begun to be cured. And the fact that Detroit, Michigan was the epicenter for basketball. The Fab Five, the Fab Five couldn't have happened if the Detroit Pistons weren't the kings of the NBA. If that portion of the country wasn't the epicenter of basketball for the moment. I just wonder if this stuff is. Everything now is so spread out, it's so widespread, it's so diluted, it's so accessible. I just don't know if moments in time are going to be as prevalent.
Well, they will be. I'm on the wave. Okay, well, let's get into
let's talk about this
2019.
Let's talk about this John Beilein stuff, because I think this is really interesting. I actually did not talk about this on the show while you were gone, because I wanted to talk about it with you.
Okay. Well, you're going to know a lot more about this than I do because I was gone. And so I have not read what you've read about this and some of the things that are being put out there about the impetus for Beilein leaving and why, what was different or perceptively, arguably, allegedly different at Michigan with him being the head coach there compared to a lot of other places. But John Beilein, who is a tremendous coach, very well respected by just across the board in terms of all things basketball, is now the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, which one could argue is a step down. I mean,
somebody took a shot on Twitter. They said his players are going to get paid a lot less. Which is ironic, because actually Beilein's the one guy that I think everybody would agree is the consensus guy who does not pay his players.
He is kind of the Ken Griffey of,
it's a great one.
Of
great analogy.
College basketball coaches right now, because everybody is assumed sort of guilty. Your hands are dirty at some level in virtue of the position that you're doing, and that may not be true. It's maybe an unfortunate thing, but I think people shrug their shoulders at Sean Miller for two reasons. Because they go, one, it's not just Sean Miller. It's everybody. And so what? And two, and this is a whole aside, which we can do for another day, but it's a bit of a victimless crime. It's a victimless crime. And so there's nobody that really gets quote-unquote hurt, even though it feels very much like sort of human trafficking, which is absolutely abhorrent, and people are like hate that and should, and yet it's not. It's different than that, and the trafficked person is actually benefiting from this thing, and so then you're sitting here going, well, okay, how bad is it really? Anyway, that's for another day. Point being, you're not allowed to do it. It is cheating. You can't be paying players. You shouldn't be paying players under the table. And a lot of people are saying, well, John Beilein didn't, and he knows that he's reached his ceiling at the University of Michigan.
The quote from John Beilein was that it's been a great run at Michigan. I think we accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish, and I am just ready for a new challenge at the highest level. And he also mentioned just how much he didn't want to go through a rebuild, because Xavier Simpson's a senior, Charles Matthews is a senior. The stud freshman kid is likely going to go to the NBA next year. And so you'd have to figure out a way to reload. Also ironic that of all the...
It's a weird thing to say at Michigan.
It's a weird thing to say at Michigan. That's the thing, though. This is where you kind of read between the lines. Ironic that the Fab Five created this whole one-and-done era, this whole one-and-done culture. And John Beilein is the highest profile, most successful coach of the last 10 years that has gravitated away from it. Mm-hmm. Even Mike Krzyzewski had to take the bait. Mm-hmm. He's gone full in. Because regardless if it has cheating or not, it's just a part of the system. And if you're not engaging in the system and you're losing because of it, Duke's never losing. But if you're falling behind because of it, I think you got to reanalyze. But it's a great editorial. I think it was at ESPN, and they said that John Beilein, if you were to have the coach who's like the coach who's like the father or the uncle or the mentor or the leader or the general or whatever you want to call it, however you want to characterize it, there's a ton of those guys. There's also the coach that is the CEO of the organization, the slick recruiter who's managing all the operations of the thing, but maybe is at arm's length from his players. And they said this columnist said that John Beilein is the last true professor. Mm. He's the last true professor. He's never going to get close enough to you for you to feel as if you are family, but you would still for sure go to battle for him, and he's going to teach you so well that it will change your life forever. And Beilein said along those lines, basically, I want to instill my basketball acumen to the most talented players in the world. And on that note, I think it's going to be very interesting because I think that John Beilein doesn't know at all what's about to hit him in terms of managing egos in the NBA. But I do think that John Beilein's high intelligence level of coaching style and the acumen that he brings. I mean, I've said for years now that I think that John Beilein is the best X's and O's coach in college basketball. There's a lot of coaches that can maybe hang with him in that element. There's a bunch of coaches that can out-recruit him, regardless of what tactic that they're using. But in terms of the adjustments he's going to make, the stuff he's going to do during games, Beilein's the guy. And if he gets a bunch of NBA guys, maybe it works. I mean, Brad Stevens is having wonderful success with it. But that's the other part about it, though, is it fell apart on Brad Stevens this year because of the non-X's and O's, because of the ego part.
But the difference is Brad Stevens has NBA players.
Totally. I see what you did there.
You see this? Okay.
The Cavs, though, being a really young team, I expect the Cavs to unload Kevin Love. Mm. We were talking earlier today, what if Kevin Love was traded to the Blazers? I mean, he's an Oregon guy. He grew up in Portland.
Yes, he did.
The Blazers have a bunch of expiring contracts they could offer for Kevin Love. Seems like a mutually beneficial deal to both, especially if the Cavs are in a rebuild. That aside, I just think that John Beilein leaving Michigan after making it to a Final Four and Elite Eight in back-to-back years, making it to 3 Final Fours in 10 years.
National championship game.
It made it to a national championship game. To me, I just think it's sad for college basketball because I just think that John Beilein is one of the last great true gentlemen and one of the last great true non-slime balls. Tom Izzo, you could argue, is probably along those same lines, but his affiliation with Michigan State automatically taints it because Michigan State has just been so marred by the scandal.
And he is, I think people respect Tom Izzo across the board, but his
coaches,
demeanor on the sideline is such. No one's going to confuse him for a professor as such.
Right, and John Beilein's so classy and tactful and calm, and he still has this element of charisma. It's going to be fascinating to watch, but I just find it sad that I just think that you could say all you want that you want to coach the highest level, but I just think if you walk away from a job like Michigan, then there's a lot deeper things that you're saying. It's a lot deeper statement that you're making.
Yeah.
About the state of the game.
I mean, he's been at Michigan how long? Long time.
I think 11 years.
Okay. So, in coaching, that is a long time to be tenured at a place. And I can joke all I want about the Cleveland Cavaliers and all that stuff, but there's something to be said for wanting to, take the next step and do it in the NBA.
There is, but the joke is halted when you talk about resources because this isn't a joke. Michigan has more resources.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
Yes and no. NBA teams have basically equitable resources.
True.
I mean, it's an even playing field because it's transparent and it's open and it's out there and it's mandated. So, that's what it is. The ironic thing is not wanting to be part of a rebuild at Michigan. He just walked into the biggest reclamation project there is in basketball in Cleveland. So it's Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Hey, it's time for another Wing It Wednesday. This time, Coulter's got some questions for you. And lo and behold, he went hockey on us. Look at you. Whew, look at you. Turning over that new leaf. 329-1899. You want to go down to the Desperado Sports Tavern, get yourself a basket of the best wings in the city of Missoula. Give us a call, 329-1899, the phone number, area code 406. Coulter's got some trivia questions for you. Wing It Wednesday, right after this.
Hey, Tootell Nuanez here. Can't tell you how many times we've heard the face for radio joke since we came on SWX television, but it's been a fun endeavor so far.
And now our esteemed producer, Tommy, is pushing the envelope even further. We got our own YouTube channel.
That's right. If you want to watch us every day from your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, you can check out Tootell and Nuanez on YouTube.
Tootell and Nuanez, live every weekday from 4 to 6 in the afternoons on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula, SWX Montana statewide, and now around the planet Earth on YouTube.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
Grab some protein in a cold drink today at Town Pump. Right now, you can get Sierra Nevada and New Belgium 12-pack cans or bottles for only $14.99. And if you're hungry, grab our 10-ounce Old Trapper Jerky for $10.99. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River. Hey folks, Ryan Tootell here with Josh from the Advocates. If you've been in a car accident and need help dealing with the insurance company, you should give the Advocates a call.
It doesn't cost anything at all to call, and I'd be happy to talk with you about your situation. You don't want to have to be dealing with contacting the insurance companies and setting up your claim. We can do that for you from start to finish. We'll take the hassle out of the process so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give Josh a call, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers, but you deserve an advocate.
It happens. You're positive you put your bank card back in your wallet, but the next time you need it, it's missing. Avoid the panic and take control with the My Card app and debit card from Farmer State Bank. Our app lets you control your debit card and securely turn it off right from your phone. Safe, secure, instant. My Card is available only at Farmer State Bank. Ask about it at any of our 9 locations or learn more at farmersebank.com. Farmer State Bank, member FDIC.
Some so-called sports bars, you spend so much time fighting to see the TV, you're better off just staying home. Others show the game, but a basket of stale rye chips is not exactly your idea of a good game grub. At the Desperado, you get front row seats to every single spring baseball and NASCAR event, plus all the spring NBA and NHL postseason action. And with juicy burgers, ice-cold brews, and the best wings in town, you'll leave the Desperado satisfied whether your team won or lost. The Desperado Sports Tavern, with the emphasis of sports, food, and good times on South Russell, across from the Y.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Coulter Nuanez, 129 ESPN Missoula. Keaton Curran, a 3-year starter who caught 20 touchdowns for the Grizzlies, will play for the Seattle XFL team, according to the XFL End Zone Twitter account. The 6'2", 198-pounder from Federal Way, Washington, caught 125 passes for 2,008 yards and 20 TDs during his 3 years at Montana after transferring from the Air Force Academy Prep School. Former standout Big Sky receivers Keelan Doss of UC Davis and Emmanuel Butler of Northern Arizona signed free agent contracts after rookie minicamps earlier this month. Doss, the 2017 Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year, signed with the Oakland Raiders, and Butler, a 2-time All-American, signed with the New Orleans Saints.
Former Big Timber basketball standout Brett Finn has decided to finish his college basketball career at Montana State. Finn, who spent 2 years at Dawson Community College last season at Texas A&M International University, announced Tuesday on Twitter that he is transferring to MSU. The 6-foot guard averaged just over 14 points per game at the Division II school last season.
And finally, a total of 24 athletes with Treasure State ties will compete at the NCAA West Preliminary Championships in Sacramento, California, beginning tomorrow, including 6 Montana Grizzlies and 5 Montana State Bobcats. Missoula native Hannah Fowler, the UM record holder in the hammer throw, enters the regional with the 10th longest throw in the field.
Wednesday, 329-1899, that phone number, 329-1899. Give us a shout. All guests join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy. Online at KurtzPolaris.com. You can find us online on YouTube. Tootell Nuanez YouTube channel. Go check it out. Subscribe. Check out the podcast also. Watch us on SWX TV. You can listen on your radios. Gracious mercy, we're everywhere. How about on Twitter at Gus Tootell, 1029 ESPN, and at Skyline Sports MT. Coulter, before we get into a Wing It Wednesday here, I wanted to bring this story up because this is the ultimate. We talk about when you talk about baseball teams and organizations, like, it's easy to forget. Anytime we talk about it, we talk about corporations, we talk about countries, nations, governments, whatever. It's just human beings. Like, it's a collection of actual people that are there. And this, to me, I love it. I love everything about this. Have you heard of Keon Broxton? Perhaps you haven't. He was a New York Met. He was a disgruntled New York Met. He has batted 7 for 49 in 34 games with the Mets this season. He's 29 years old. He's batting 143. Coulter, is that good?
Not great.
Not great. Broxton told reporters Wednesday, I haven't been playing too much. I haven't gotten as many opportunities. He has been unhappy with his playing time. I'm amazed he's getting any playing time. He was designated for assignment. That didn't sit well with him. He didn't ask to be traded. He just sort of complained. And the Mets said, you know what? You don't want to be here? You and your .143 batting average? Have a nice trip to Baltimore. Traded him to the Baltimore Orioles, who are, 15-33, the second worst record in the league. The Mets, by the way, just 3 games below 500. The basically worst team, along with the Miami Marlins in baseball, is the Baltimore Orioles. You know what they traded him for? $500,000 of international bonus pool money, which is also to say nothing. Nothing. They just made a way so that they could send a guy that they were unhappy with, who was voicing complaints and not performing at all, off to the worst team in baseball. Thanks for being here.
That was your Burn Street Bistro Burn of the Week.
If you're not going to get anything for a guy anyway, what do you care if it's $700,000 of bonus pool money? Send him to the worst team and send a message. You think it's bad here? Have a good time down there. Giving up the most home runs in the history of baseball at Baltimore. Maybe you'll get a hit off your own staff.
Few things here. First of all, it's totally mind-blowing that the Baltimore Orioles have been so bad the last couple of years.
Horrific.
Horrifically bad. But how? I mean, Baltimore was a very proud franchise for years and years and years and years. They have one of the great stadiums in all of baseball.
Here's how. Chris Davis is an all-star, a great slugger, one of the big power hitters in baseball. 7 minutes ago, he gets paid, and then Squadouche sets the all-time record for hitlessness and futility.
And also strikes out like 3 times a game.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So I don't know how that happens, but that is how Baltimore has digressed into oblivion.
Yeah. Well, at one point they had Chris Davis, Manny Machado, and Adam Jones. That's a great place to start.
Yep.
Those are good players. Secondly, the international money is funny because I don't think you even meant to pair these two things together. But the part we skipped last segment was about Carter Stewart, this kid who's going to go play in Japan until he's 25. The international money it's just like in soccer. You have to pay the Japanese team in this case money to negotiate with that player. Like when Ichiro came over, Hideki Matsui came over, or
Otani,
Darvish, the American clubs are paying millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so to get the international bonus pool money, they're basically just banking money because they are the Mets to go after perhaps this Carter Stewart or another international, or likely Japanese player.
Or maybe to pay Bobby Bonilla another $1.9 million at the end of July.
Never ends. Love it.
Never ends. This Carter Stewart story is really interesting, Colter. And I think this is one that you especially would be interested in. I think our listeners would as well. But Carter Stewart.
Give her the phone number again so we can get a caller in here first.
Okay, 329-1899.
Wing It Wednesday.
Do a Wing It Wednesday. Colter loves his trivia questions today. We want you to get your wings. It's going to be hard, though, because I just watched Tommy walk down the hallway. I don't know what he's up to. Carter Stewart is a 19-year-old kid who was drafted, I think, in the second round of the MLB draft. He's out of Florida. He was drafted with the 8th pick overall in the 2018 high school draft, but didn't sign after they reduced their signing bonus offer due to an alleged injury. So he was going to get, if you're a first round, a top 10 draft pick, you are entitled to potentially a very large signing bonus, but a team doesn't have to give that to you if they think there's questions. They didn't want to give it, the Braves, to Carter Stewart, and he said, you know what, thanks but no thanks, I'll wait for round 2. So he came back, was back in high school, came back this year, was a second round draft pick, which is entitling him to somewhere in the $2 million neighborhood when it comes to the signing bonus. Here's the thing that people maybe don't really understand. If you are a high draft pick by a baseball team, you can get a very nice signing bonus, and nobody's going to argue that $2 or even $4 million is anything but great for an 18-year-old kid. That said, after that, you go to play for the Missoula Osprey, and you got to pay for a place to stay. You are getting paid in food and gift cards. And then
sometimes depends what your contract is.
But if you're if you go double A, it's like $10,000 a year.
Yeah, but a lot of times guys sign contracts right after getting drafted. Like last year the Osprey had 2 guys that were first or second round draft picks that are getting paid millions of dollars.
Well, their signing bonus is that. That is right. But But right immediately after you get drafted, the pay does not. I mean, Chris Bryant was in the big leagues making $1 million because he had not yet. It's a 6-year wait till you become a full-fledged free agent. That's 6 years being in the system, being in the majors. So you can be in the system for like 9 years before your full free agency comes up, where you can actually cash in on a huge deal in your mid to late 20s. Carter said, no, I'm good. I'm going to Japan. They will pay me. He's got a 6-year, $7 million plus guaranteed contract. He would not make half of that in the next 6 years in the United States. And because he goes international, he will be free to negotiate at 25 years old, as opposed to 6 years in after 3 years in the minors, which would put him at about 28 years old, an actual big unabridged contract in the bigs. So this is the first time ever that this is happening, where a kid is not going to go the route of the MLB team in the farm system. He's going to Japan. Now, what's the development going to be? He's a pitcher. What's that going to look like? I don't know. But an interesting decision, certainly more financially viable in the near future. And specifically, if he's still good, he is going to be able to bank in a big contract with a Major League Baseball team 3 years sooner than he would have been able to if he would have gone through the farm system. And if this works, and Scott Boras is his agent, if this works, you're going to see a lot more than this. But this might be a new pathway to usurp some of these very organization-friendly rules that are on the books when it comes to drafts and paying players and when and how you do that. Anyway.
Hold that thought. We'll do some trivia because I have another thought on this in relation to basketball.
We go to the phones. We welcome in Pat to the show. Pat, thanks for holding on. How are you?
Good, guys. How are you?
Doing great, Pat. We got several quick trivia questions for you from Colter today.
Oh, no.
Yes.
No, we didn't call about trivia.
Oh, what are we calling about, Pat?
Well, hockey questions. I'd have about as much chance as that Mackla dude or Mackmore contest we had, but.
Pit case in point, our listeners don't know who Macklemore is.
Yes.
And the co-host of the show doesn't even know how to say his name.
I do know how to say it. I was on the original call.
No, he's referring to me.
I mean,
That's
Ryan,
okay.
not
He's
you,
talking
Pat.
about me.
Pat, you're in the clear.
Okay.
I'm talking about Ryan. He doesn't know how to say it. He says Macklemore instead of Macklemore.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to point out our good buddy Keon Broxton was an Osprey. He played here. He was a good-looking player.
Is that right? Keon Broxton, one of the O's, who's now an O again. He'd be better off as an Osprey than an Oriole, it seems to me.
Certainly.
You know what I mean? Coming on through.
Yeah, I hate to wish the Orioles on anybody, but.
Well, Pat, here's what's going to happen. Just because you're here, you're going to do some trivia with us anyways, and I'm going to help you out, okay? That's what we're going to do. So
I got 3 lifelines.
You got it. Let's go. Question number 1,
All right.
Coulter.
All right, Pat, number 1. What franchise is the last NBA franchise to advance to the NBA Finals 5 years in a row? They did it in the 1960s. Warriors just made the Finals for the 5th year in a row. Who's the last NBA franchise to do that? They did that in the 1960s.
Oh, I got to think the Celtics.
Boston Celtics, 1 for 1.
Look at you.
See, now you're in the money, Pat. Now you're in the money because now you just got to go 1 for 2, and Ryan knows the answer to both these other questions, so you're good. You're going to get wings without even wanting them.
Oh, I always want them.
You always want them. I see.
All right, here we go.
Okay, number 2. When was the last time the St. Louis Blues advanced to the Stanley Cup final?
Lifeline.
1970.
Ding,
Pat,
ding, ding.
Against the
Boston Bruins,
who they're playing in this Stanley Cup final.
There you go.
So 49 years later, they're playing the same team.
Pat, you got yourself some wings, and we'll give you an extra lifeline because I don't know if Ryan does know this one.
Oh, boy.
They call them the original 6, the 6 original teams in the franchise, or in the NHL, 6 original franchises. This original 6 team is the only NHL franchise with a longer Stanley Cup final drought than the Blues drought of 49 years. Name that original 6 franchise.
Toronto Maple Leafs.
I was going to say that.
What do we got?
That is
Coulter?
what it is.
All right. Shirts all the way around. Pat, great work. Thank you for letting us know that Keon Broxton was a Missoula Osprey. And enjoy your wings and your shirt. Give your information to Tommy, all right?
I will. Thanks a lot, guys.
You got it. Giving it away even when people aren't ready for it.
Hey, Tootell, Nuanez here. Can't tell you how many times we've heard the face for radio joke since we came on SWX television, but it's been a fun endeavor so far.
And now our esteemed producer Tommy is pushing the envelope even further. We got our own YouTube channel.
That's right. If you want to watch us every day from your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, you can check out Tootell and Nuanez on YouTube.
Tootell and Nuanez live every weekday from 4 to 6 in the afternoons on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula, SWX Montana statewide, and now around the planet Earth on YouTube.
Good news. Missoulians can finally move into what we love best, being outside. Garden City Paint and Glass can help you get a head start on all those outside home improvement projects. Now is also a great time to start getting a jump on cracked windows and broken screens. Enjoy up to 25% off select products. And be sure to watch for PPG rebates to help the job along. Look good, stay comfortable, and keep energy costs down at Garden City Paint and Glass. 3217 Brooks or 549-0608.
We ate a lot of steaks before we came up with the Montana Club's Private Reserve Cut Angus. It's as good a steak as you're going to get. Our Private Reserve Cut Angus is specially cut for us. And with our custom seasoning, it has a flavor that's absolutely incomparable. We're confident that it will satisfy the most discriminating steak customer for an unrivaled steak experience. Real Montana, real food. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever just in time for summer. There's our exclusive open range AT that we believe is our quietest, smoothest, and best all-season traction tire ever. Or the Reputation, our exclusive high-mileage premium passenger tire. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 open range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
Hey folks, the best season of the year is upon us. That's right, it's tax return season, and there's one place to have the most fun and make that refund check stretch further than anywhere else, Selway Armory. Selway Armory has the largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories of anywhere around, and they have the expertise to go with it. It's not everywhere that you can shop local and save money, but Selway Armory will meet or beat any box store price, and your money stays in Montana. It's tax return time, so get more bang for your buck at Selway Armory. Visit online at selwayarmory.com. Hey everybody, here with my good friend Josh from the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, if I've been in an accident, how much is it going to cost me to hire you?
Well, we take cases on a contingency fee. And what that means for you is that if you're hurt in an accident, we only get paid if you make a recovery. You'll never owe us anything out of pocket.
What about the call for a consultation?
That's not a problem. We don't charge anything for an initial consultation, so you have absolutely nothing to risk by calling us.
If you're injured in a car accident, call the Advocates, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com.
If it matters to Missoula, it matters to us. Ryan Tootell and Coulter Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio.
Tootell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the show, listen on the podcast. Podcast available on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes and on Spotify. Also on the station website, 1029ESPN.com. Like it, love it, rate it, review it, subscribe to it, and get it anytime you want. Tootell Nuanez podcast available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. All right, Coulter. We went down today and interviewed two of the track and field coaches at Sentinel High School as the state track meet is coming up this weekend, also known as the greatest weekend of Coulter's year.
No, that already happened, bro. Big Sky Outdoor Track and Fields. We're in Missoula. That already happened.
Yeah. But you have some updates on, speaking of that, Montanans going to the NCAA
This is for college, in fact.
Yep, collegiate track and field, West Regional. So the West Regional meet, there's two regionals, the West and the East. That's it. And then if you're successful there, then you go to nationals there at the University of Oregon. But going to the regional is a big deal. And there's a number of Montanans that are in this regional track and field tournament.
Yeah, there's 6 Montana Grizzlies going. Jane Booth, who's a Corvallis native, she's going in the high jump. Olivia Ellis, who originally hails from Spokane, but she runs for the University of Montana. She's going in the 400-meter hurdles, arguably the worst race ever created by mankind. Hannah Fauser, who's from right here in Missoula, Montana, Big Sky grad. She is headed there in the hammer throw. Jensen Lilquist, real deal competitor for a national spot in the javelin. He currently right now ranks 11th in the region, and 12 from each region go. Hannah Fauser, she's 10th in the region in the hammer, so she is definitely in the mix as well. And then Brett Yankee, I think it's Yankee, from University of Montana, he is going in the shot put. Some Montana State competitors, Duncan Hamilton, phenom. Duncan Hamilton won the 3,000-meter steeplechase in dominant fashion as a true freshman.
Wow.
He's from Bozeman, Montana. He's from Montana State. He'll be competing there. Drake Schneider, another outstanding athlete. He is the 2-time 400-meter hurdle champion already in the Big Sky Conference. He's only a sophomore. Kelsey Lasota from Great Falls, Carly, who's a distance runner, Carly Van Heeter, who's from Plains, who's a javelin thrower, and Alex Lewis, originally from Moscow, Idaho, from Montana State. He will compete in the long jump. And then a variety of other natives from Montana that are competing at other schools. including Pippi Idol, who is the daughter of Tom Idol, the longtime multi-events coach at Montana State. Pippi Idol runs at Northern Arizona. So she's going to compete in the 1,500 meters. A couple other names worth noting. Sadie Henderson is a girl we had on this show, talked about on this show, several times last year. She is one of the great 800-meter runners in the country. She qualified for nationals at Boise State last year. Well, she's a graduate transfer now at San Francisco, and she was a 6-time Mountain West Conference champion in the 800 meters, and she currently has the 8th best 800-meter time in the entire country right now. So she'll be competing in this regional. Annie Hill, who's a girl who I know a lot of people around here followed quite a bit. She's from Kalispell Glacier. She's running at Colorado. She is with McKenna Morley down there at Colorado. McKenna Morley, one of the great athletes, period, to ever come out of Montana. And the one Grizz I forgot was Marin Lowry. She's a grad transfer from Iowa State. I had a great interview with her, and maybe if she advances to nationals, we'll get her on again because I was very impressed with her. It's always great to interview girls or any gender of athlete when they just get done running 1,500 meters because they are quite enlightened.
Yeah,
they're very happy.
They got the
runner's high going.
Yeah.
They always got good stuff to say. But a couple other competitors from in-state that are competing elsewhere. Dawson Lawrence, who's from Billings, he's run at the University of Minnesota, and he'll compete in 2 different distance races. And Aiden Reed is a guy that was a champion runner from Helena, who is now at Southern Utah, and he's a real contender in both the 5K and the 10K. Interviewed Aiden Reed last week, too, and he's a great one. And then the last one, the only Montanan competing in the East Regional, is Emily Malone, Missoula Sentinel product, who's at North Carolina. So she was the 2018 Class AA state champion in the javelin for Missoula Sentinel, and she currently has the 42nd ranked jav throw in the East. So
wow,
good for her making it happen in North Carolina.
Quickly, before we get out, Monday is Memorial Day. It is also the first day of the Stanley Cup playoff final, the Stanley Cup final. They are waiting nearly a whole week to get that thing started. St. Louis at Boston, 6 o'clock local time on NBC television. Coulter, here's my trivia question for you. Give me your best guess. The lowest price secondary ticket. Don't look now.
I can't see that far.
To get in the barn in Boston for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup
the
final.
Lowest price secondary ticket.
What's the cheapest ticket you can get on the secondary
I'd say
market?
$100.
It's the Stanley Cup final. I mean, it's probably face value $100.
I guess this is a trick question. Tell me, Gus.
$575.
Wow. That's amazing.
Is it amazing? I thought it was just right in the heart of what I would have expected.
Yeah, I guess I have a skewed deal because NHL regular season games are so much more, or they're so much cheaper than normal.
I mean,
I sat on the glass at a Colorado Avalanche game for $110.
I mean, that's pretty great.
I watched Jerome McGinley playing for the Avs score his 100th or his 600th goal against the Flames.
How can you hate hockey?